All right. Well, we should be live. Hello and welcome to Audionautic Deep Space Network. I don't even know what number it is. It is 122. That's why I got the docket open. Today, we are talking about Audacity. Yes, Audacity is still around. They keep getting updates, and they got a really big update that's becoming more and more DAW-like. Very interesting, but still free. Still all that. Very cool. And then next, we're going to talk the Donner, I think it's Donner Essential D1. We covered this when they announced it, I believe, about a year ago. Very cool drum machine. Guess you could call it a sampler to a degree. We've got a price and it's coming out. So we'll talk about that and see kind of where it fits in this price range. Is it in a good range for the price that it's at? Is it worth that kind of money? And then finally, we're taking a look at Ableton, as if we haven't talked about that enough recently, but Ableton live looping and how Curtis takes loops that he builds on live streams and things like that. And then, he's got all these ideas in a 4-bar, 8-bar loop, but how do you take that and turn it into a full track? My name is Sunwarper, and with me today is Eon Lake. Eon Lake, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for asking. Yes.
Yeah. Upgraded to a new phone. You're feeling good, huh?
Yeah.
Consumerism at its best.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I waited a very long time.
That's what I mean. You can give the context. What did you update from?
Your finger.
You had a flip phone, right? What did you update from, though?
It was an iPhone 8 to a 15.
It's a big. I bet your camera looks like a completely different world.
It does a bit, yeah.
Yeah. How you been?
I've been. Do you know what? I shall confess to not being great on a producer. That's sort of from a producer point of view. I'm going through one of those what's it all about stages. You know those stages you go through.
I'm with you. That's
why don't I do this? What the hell? I'll come out the other side of it. I've been doing this long enough to realize that it's a cyclical thing, but essentially that's what I've been doing. I've been disappearing up my own backside a bit, and yeah.
Well, you're not alone. Survey Channel says, "Me too, Eon Lake," and I'm with you. I don't have any videos or anything done for my channel. I've been sick, so I had to postpone a live stream, and then I was trying to get back into it, writing scripts, and I was just like, "What? Nothing sounds good." You ever have that where you're probably what you're kind of at, but everything you think of or do just like doesn't sound right to you? It's just like, this is not good.
You just need to have the energy, and you need to be in a good condition yourself, both physically and mentally, to really have anything to offer sometimes. I mean, I try not to sweat it too much, but yeah, and I do think,
Well, I was going to say, for me, I just keep pushing through.
I always do, but struggling with it all a bit, really, to be honest.
Yeah, I was going to say, for me, I just keep doing it. And at some point, either the things I'm putting down will click, or I'll shelve them. And then something, because I've just been keep working and reinforcing that, something finally clicks. Or I go like, actually, this one wasn't that bad. So, I mean, that's what I do. I just like keep going. And it sounds like you're the same way, right?
Just like you say, it's a discipline, isn't it, really? You need to, this is something, if you like doing it and you want to do it, at least semi-seriously, I think you need to just be doing it whether you feel like it or not, regardless. And I think these times will come and go.
I think the best way I've heard it put is ebbs, flows, and solos, right, Curtis? Speaking of, also with me today is the Audionautic co-pilot, Curtis. How are you?
It was a good segue.
What can I say?
Very good, bro. Yeah, I'm good. I am in the stage just after the what's it all about phase, and so I have been out in the real world. I've been basing it up in a live setting. I've been building stuff, and I've come back here and kind of had a rethink about how I'm going to do things and what I want to do and what I want to get out of this in that way. So that's nice. For all that time that I spent building the sketch station over there, I have been right back here. Bree brought in these guys here, and now I have two setups basically in one, which is nice. So yeah. We keep flipping and flopping between two different stages, which is nice in that way.
You can go crazy and pretend you're a duo.
Right? Schizophrenia. That's what it's all
Arguing
about.
yourself over artistic.
I get it, man. That's always
Yeah,
nice.
that's good. That's good.
So it's always been fun. What you been doing, bro? You're still feeling a bit sick, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm still getting better. So I'll be riding the mute. And this time I've got my microphone and all the normal setup, but nothing is as it should be in the studio still. I've not had any time to do that. So yeah, I haven't even, all I've been doing is working in Logic Pro on iPad. And I got to say, I've really tried to hate it, but I actually really like Logic for iPad. And I do not like the subscription model at all, but it's been awesome. I just open this iPad and I'm just making tracks, like full on tracks. And then I could just open it in Logic on my computer and have everything there. And then, just keep going. It's really cool in that regard. It drives me crazy that it's a subscription only model. I wish they would just put, like a purchase one time thing or something like that. But it's $50 a year if you do the yearly subscription. So it's a lot. I don't like it. I'm not justifying it, but it's not like it's not like $20 a month or something. It's $5 or whatever a month. So it's not the worst, but yeah, I really tried to hate it. And I'm like, oh, I actually really like this. And then just like throwing things into, because with USB-C on the iPad, I can just have the SP connected and I've got my hardware that I can treat these sounds and stuff. So it's very handy in that regard, getting things done. Sketch Audio is in the chat. I'm going to say hello to everybody in the chat, but we'll be having Sketch Audio on, I believe it's next week, to talk the developer end of making these things and apps. And I've been using some of their apps in it. Dr. Vibe is a vibe. I don't know how else to describe it. That thing is amazing. And we'll talk about that, but it's a tape emulation, noise, all that. But I've been throwing it all over.
Right up your alley.
Dude, it's right. It's basically like an SP404 in Logic and, stuff like that. But they'll be on next week. So if you have any questions regarding creating musical apps and things like that, or anything like that, because I really want to hear, like, how do you go about making these presets and things like that, or emulating, like there's emulations of the SP303. Like, how do you go about doing that? So we'll talk all that kind of stuff, and they're in our Discord as well. But yeah, to his point, the $5, it's not the worst thing, but it's the fact that, I mean, it's $50 a year. So if you do that for 5 years, it's just a ridiculous amount of money where you could just buy it outright on the computer and you have it, but there's no cross between those two. Anyways, quickly, just to say hello to everybody in the chat. We've got some of our patrons, and a lot of our patrons were in the secret sample listening party we just had. We do server challenges on our Discord every month, and we had a really awesome one, big turnout, and I was impressed by everybody's tracks. But we'll talk more about that in our community corner. But Bendu is in the chat. How's it going? Little Bro is in the chat, says hello. Loved the secret sample. Yeah, I was really impressed with their sample. That was, or the track that they made. That was awesome. Survey Channel is in the chat. What's going on? Abby is in the chat. How are we all today? How's everybody doing? Let us know what you've been working on, all that. But yeah, let's get into the news. So let's start with Audacity. So this was actually the first DAW, whatever you want to call it, I used ever when I first started. And it was just like audio. You baked in the effects and all that. But there's been some changes to it. So Curtis, you got this one. What's going on with Audacity?
Yeah, so I mean, they've been having a small revamps here and there over the last couple of years, but they've just brought this big one out. They're calling it's Audacity 3.6, and it has a lot of integration with third-party applications now, which previously it's not been able to do. It's been that very clunk and click kind of recording audio, get stuff done, slightly tweak it, and then move on. But now a lot more has come with it. So first and foremost, you can get the plugins, third-party plugins such as Spitfire Audio, Orchestra Tools, Vienna Symphonic Library, for example. These are all connected under the umbrella of Muse Sounds. So you can have an integration with that, which is really nice. So you can start using those audio plugins, or you can start using the basics of MIDI in that regard, which is up until now not been seen with Audacity at all in that regard. As well as that, we have an entire new library of loops and samples. which again we haven't seen. It's all been very much you make the sounds and you record the sounds with Audacity, but they're all royalty-free, ready-made samples, sound effects, kits, tracks, and they can just be clicked and dragged into the interface itself. And finally, as well as that, we have standalone apps or integration with other standalone apps, namely AI music or AI music composition and podcast production tools. You can do stem splitting, which is really nice in that regard, which basically, as far as I can tell, gives you this new kind of like platform to build your podcast or your small composition or whatever it might be in that regard. So it's had a thickening out, so to speak.
Yeah, it's like getting closer and closer to DAW. Now we have a video. Do we want to play a small segment of it? I mean, I think you covered basically like everything they're doing, but do we want a visual side to it?
Let's put it through. Yeah, bring it up.
Well, first, we've given it a visual facelift for both its light and dark modes. These visual changes are aimed at making interactions clearer while providing a more unified and appealing look and feel. Apart from that, we've also introduced two new powerful effects, a compressor and a limiter, which both work in real time. And to really take advantage of what these effects can do, we've introduced a new master effects channel in Audacity where you can try them out. Just click on the effects button on any track to open the effects panel, and you'll see the master channel towards the bottom. Since the master channel applies to all tracks in your project, adding the real-time compressor applies to your overall mix. This is also a great place to add dedicated mastering effects too. For example, we have a free mastering effect available from the MuseHub that you can get right now. By using these kinds of effects in the master channel, you can sculpt your overall mix in ways that just weren't possible before.
So, I mean, it's becoming more and more DAW-like. Look at that. I mean, first of all, seeing Audacity was like instant nostalgia because I remember that color scheme and all that. Like, it does look different, but still, I remember that like bluish purple, you know, the waveforms and all that. Ian, like, did you use Audacity at all?
Yeah, many times over the years. It's one of those things. It's really weird. It's never changed that much. It seems to be changing quite a lot suddenly.
Yeah,
but they seem to have gone the opposite way to everyone else. So, I mean, back in the day, things like Cubase and Logic were sequencers, and you'd use them to sequence whole studios and sometimes control mix automation on desks and stuff. And then, obviously, as hard disk recording came along and you could do that, they started to introduce that, and you started to have DAWs like we know now. And Audacity have always been the opposite. It was like a wave and sound manipulation tool that stayed that way and now is beginning to flirt with the idea of MIDI after all these years, and also plugins and VSTs. I mean, it
seems like they're making a push for podcasting too, like in terms of still being an audio, you know, but the way they've done, like, oh, we have a master, we have a compressor and limiter now that we've added, like all these things.
It's not
very much
free, is it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think they put even on that YouTube thing, like, because someone said it's becoming more and more like a DAW. I think they commented, like, will always be free or something like that.
That's crazy. I mean, you know, it always has been a really good tool for the fact that it's free.
How about that for a sample challenge or a server challenge? Make a track in Audacity.
Yeah.
I've got it. That gives me an idea for a video or something. Like, can I still use Audacity to make a full track? Yeah, I mean, but they're adding a lot. Like, you could theoretically master things in there. It's got a compressor, a limiter, and all that. But yeah, I don't know. Would you download it again, Ian? Like,
I've got it.
You've got it. Oh, well, would you download the update then?
Yeah, I need to update it. Yeah,
there you go.
I've used it for editing stuff recently.
Okay.
Relatively recently. Sometimes I use Logic. Sometimes I use Audacity. Sometimes I'd still keep it in Ableton. It varies. Okay.
And Curtis, what about you? You gonna grab this?
Yeah, I use Audacity on a semi-regular basis. So it's nice that this has come through. Yeah.
What do you use it for?
We have a sound booth upstairs, and so we do a lot of voice acting and voiceover work for YouTube videos and stuff like that. And it's just a lot easier to work with Audacity in that regard because of the no bells and whistles side of it. It just, you press record, it records, it gives you high quality audio and you just get it done.
Yeah.
And because I'm working with other people who might not necessarily use Ableton, it's easy to transfer it across, and it's really nice and simple.
Yeah, Little Bro asks, is it easier than Ableton? I'm gonna say it's completely different because it's really geared for audio recording, like Curtis was saying. I don't even know if there is sequencing in MIDI at the moment, or was that something they just added, Curtis?
I've just added MIDI. I don't know about
yeah,
sequencing.
okay. So, I mean, it's free, which is nice, but it's I don't think I'd call it a DAW. It does recording and all that, and it looks like it's getting more and more, but it's kind of its own thing. But as where was it? Survey Channel says it's a piece of history. I mean, I think a lot of people either get started with it or use it at some point, especially for like audio recording. And then Survey Channel added, I use Audition, but I will be downloading me some Audacity with it back in active development and improvements being made. And yeah, like Survey Channel puts it, it's more of an audio editor at its root. Definitely. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And that's a good point. It was kind of undeveloped for a while. It had a bit of a limbo phase, but
yeah, I think did it get bought out by this Muse group or something?
It did, yeah. It was gonna go under, and then they took it back. It was gonna go under, they took it back, and they've just spent the last couple of years just completely revamping it and changing the way that it works and stuff like that. And I think this is a product of a couple of years worth of stuff. I can't remember the guy's name. I can't remember his name, but he's Irish and he's on YouTube and he does lots of stuff with music. But he's been kind of at the forefront of this for a long time. So yeah, that's kind of where he's coming forward. The idea is to kind of bring it up to the status of a DAW, but keep that core of Audacity being free, open source, and easy to use with a low barrier to entry for anyone who wants to get into this.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love it. Audacity's always kind of been like that, and it's great to see it still going. It's still getting updates, especially now it's back and getting lots of stuff and seeing plugins coming and things like that. And I'm curious to look into this, like Muse Sounds, you know, the things that they're putting up, those free things and stuff like that. I think I'm gonna grab it. Let's put it that way. I think it's time to get Audacity back in the rotation. Everybody in the Patreon was trying to get me to get Ableton. Eon Lake was pushing hard. He's like, I've got a light version if you want to update or if you want to upgrade and this and that. I'm like, bro, I got the budget right now, but free, that I can do.
Yeah, indeed. I feel obliged to support them anyway, just because they exist.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like it should be, it's like you say, free, open source, and they keep it that way for the good of the people. And you can never go wrong with that anti-capitalist malarkey. It's great.
Yeah.
And I really do think making a track in Audacity is going to be one of the challenges we put up, or we'll be putting up a new vote for the challenges since we finished this sample challenge. But yeah, I think that's a good one. We'll see. We had quite some ideas in the listening party today, so could get, I don't know. It's going to get pretty intense.
Yeah, we'll put it in the queue. There we are getting a lot through. The last sample challenge, just to briefly touch on that, so we've brought it up a few times. We had our listening party today, secret sample. Thank you for everyone who came and hung out with us in the Discord. We should probably make the tracks available because we got snippets because there was a lot. There's a lot of people. We only had an hour, so we only took like a minute of each one. So we should put the tracks up for people in the Discord to see. But thank you to those who tuned in. It was really fun. And so we have closed it. And Sunwarper will be putting a poll up in the Discord after the show or tomorrow, whenever he gets around to it, and to vote for the next one. So yeah, it was really good fun. Everyone had such great ideas and really took the samples in a completely different fashion.
Yeah, I mean, it was very interesting to see what everybody did with each sample, because some of the samples were really interesting and out there, and what everybody did with them. It was very inspiring to see, because I had to hear all the samples the way we did it. It wasn't quite so secret for me because I had to curate it and all that. But I was like, oh, I was waiting to hear what everybody did, and there were some buzzer beats. Some people got me the tracks like 5 minutes before we went live, but that's okay. It's all right. We got them in, and it was really cool to see what everybody did with it. And like on my end, I worked in a completely different way than normal. I had an audio sample from Eon Lake. He was playing hand pans, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a really cool sample, but I took small segments of it, chopped the sample like maybe 5-second segments, and then created a sampler in Logic from it. And so every note on the piano roll was like a granular segment of that 5-second audio sample, and then I quantized it to the beat, and then just kind of like moved things around, and then just kept building. And I never do that with samples. Like, it was a really different workflow for me, but it's something I definitely want to try more, especially when working with like vinyl samples or something. And yeah, that's kind of the goal of these sample challenges and server challenges, is to just work out of our normal comfort zones. And there's no pressure. It's not meant to be a finished track or anything like that. It's just to kind of get something done in a short amount of time, have that, like, you know, push it through the creative phase, get it done, and then we just listen to it together as a group. And it's a very friendly place. There's no judgment. We're just here to hang out and talk. But yeah, I'll be posting the poll. We're gonna go a genre you don't normally work in, the same sample, everybody flips the same sample, or do a track in a specific time limit. And then if that time limit one wins the poll, we're going to split that vote again and do 60 minutes, 30 minutes, or 15 minutes. So I would really like to do a track in 15 minutes. That would be a lot of fun. I remember there was a YouTube channel that would do that, like, track in 10 minutes. And I love those. Those are awesome, just to see what you can do in such a short amount of time.
They are good. And I think it's going to be exciting to see what kind of comes through, what the community want to do. And I think just stemming by with that notion of what's it all about, so to speak, for me at least, this one has been a very remedial, so to speak, in getting through that phase, because it's so what's the phrase, low stakes, so to speak. It's just fun. It's literally just for fun, and there's nothing attached to it. There's no kind of anything other than playfulness involved. And so for me, it was a really good way of pushing through that notion of, you know, taking this too seriously in that regard, so it's great.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I was surprised by what Eon Lake did with that distorted guitar sample that he had.
I was not surprised at all. That was full.
I wasn't surprised that he did something cool. I was surprised by what he ended up with. I thought he'd do something. Yeah, that's what I mean. It wasn't masked in any way. Like, the guitar was still at the forefront, that like chugging distorted guitar that he had a sample of. So yeah, it was interesting. But
fix it.
yeah. But these challenges, the show, everything that we do is all thanks to our patrons. And if you want to help support the show, become a patron, get exclusive hangouts and exclusive Discord channels and sample packs and all that kind of stuff. Patreon.com/Audionautic. It's the best way to help support the show, and it keeps us running. It helps us do these shows week in and week out. We've got quite a few of our patrons in the chat today, and they also we have quite the turnout of patrons in the sample challenge. And it's an awesome place. We can talk gear. It's a friendly place where we can talk about all the things that, you know, might glaze eyes in public when we talk about LFOs and envelope filters and things like that. But here we're like, oh, and what'd you do then? Like, how did that work? Maybe I can do that. You know, like, it's a space where we can share these ideas and to like-minded individuals and things like that. Curtis, anything else you want to add about that?
Just about the added extras that you get as part of that as well. There is the burgeoning community, like you say. There is the extra few servers in the Discord where we have our own discussions, and usually the discussions that we have here on the show are talked about and premeditated through the patron chat, which is really nice to kind of get the seeds for the shows there. But also the freebies and the extras. So, like, we get early access to our stuff on Audionautic Records, for example. Certain patrons got codes for my EP release, which came out last week. You get them just as and when. But also sample packs, which I've just received, or I received earlier on, Sunwarper's contribution to our new sample pack, which I'll be cutting up and making fit for download over the weekend, where basically this is a patron exclusive, and you just get some samples that are original, royalty free, and are not heavily processed or from any person looking to make money. They're just, we've been around the world and we've got these recordings, have them, that kind of thing. So they're very unique in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. With that, let's move back to some of the news, because I want to cover this Donner D1. I think it's Donner Essential D1. So I think they released an announcement of this about a year ago, and we covered it, and it looked interesting. Donner makes some pretty affordable gear and things like that. If you could, I think you're pulling it up on the screen right now, but we've got a video from them, like their announcement of the release video. But I was a little surprised by the price. So let's check out the video and then discuss the price and see. So if you don't mind hitting play on that one, Curtis.
Yeah. Where's my screen? Here it is.
Yeah, so I mean, the video just kind of shows you what's going on with it there, and yeah, Eon likes having a good time with the video. So that was the D1. See if you could just get a picture of it that we can keep up on the screen there, Curtis, from that video. I mean, it looks kind of cool. You know, it's color-coded UI. There's an LCD display. It's got 5 touch-sensitive infinite encoders that display effects parameters on the screen when touched, allowing for parameter checking without altering settings and things like that. Curtis put it back up. There you go. There's the encoders, and then there's like a couple other things. And the sound engine includes 12 tracks with 1 to 2 specific effects per track, which I think is cool. 2 send effects, delay and reverb, and a compressor on the master channel. They've also got 16 drum kits, 64 preset beat patterns, storage for up to 128 patterns. Factory content is developed by Donner in collaboration with Loop Masters. They claim it's suitable for electronic music genres like house and techno. There's sample importing, which I think is very cool, having it be sample pads and things like that. And then let's see, it can be used standalone or connected, obviously, with MIDI and things like that. There's an aux in. Actually, I don't know if it. I would assume it does MIDI, but it's saying you can connect via aux in to the B1, which I think is their synthesizer. So it looks cool. It sounds decent. You can watch some reviews and things like that. We haven't had a chance to actually check it out, but I kind of like the aesthetic of it in like a weird way. I don't know. And I like the different lights and things like that. I like the idea that it's got you can import samples and things like that, but it's $400. So I'm curious. Yeah, I was thinking more in because I swear the Donner B1 that the 303 clone or whatever that they did was like $150. So I was just assuming it was around that. Yeah, it's 130. The Donner B1. It's I think it's a 303 clone. It's $129 on Amazon and on Donner. So I was a little surprised that this was 400, if that is correct from what I saw. Eon, like, I mean, you seem to really enjoy the video. What are you thinking about this?
The video is very funny. Yeah, it's great. Clearly you're going to have to save some money for the outfit, you know, for performing like that.
Oh, I'm sorry. It looks like it's 250 or 300.
I think 250 makes a big difference. I mean,
I don't know where I saw the 400, but so I'm not exactly sure on the price. Sorry to cut you off, but it's saying on Donner Music it's listing it at $299. So
that's what, $50 difference.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the price.
To a 404 is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, compared to a 404, then see the prices are all over the place. Somewhere it says something, and then okay, I think it's $299. And if anyone in the chat or if you're watching this back says differently, then go ahead and post it. But I'm seeing on Amazon $299, on Donner Music $299. So let's just for now say it's 300, not 400. Yeah. But the B1, the synth that they make is, it looks like, and now it's older, but it looks like it's $130, $150.
Right. Okay. I think the market these days is saying that for around 300, there's quite a lot of things you should probably get, even if it's, you know, a little thing that might be a little bit wibbly wobbly in places, but relatively well made with quite a lot of features. It seems to have a lot of that.
Yeah, EP133 is $300.
Yeah, I know which I'd rather have, to be fair. And this is not going to get a look in until I've got an EP133.
Well, I mean, I think it depends too. Do you want more of a drum machine or do you want more of a sampler?
Why not both?
Yeah, I like something that can kind of sit in the middle a bit, you know, and do the short one shots, but it's got a bit of room for something longer if you need it to, you know, and something that I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it was the video that was distracting me from the product a bit too much.
Well, let me throw it to Curtis. So you say why not both? What's your why not both at $300?
Well, just if the Teenage Engineering EP133 is available for $300, just get that. It's more flexible. It's the same price. It looks cooler, and it speaks to me more, because if you get a sampler in that regard, even if it has a short sample time like the 133 does, you can still put drum samples in it and just use it as a drum machine if you wanted to. In that,
I have one counterpoint though, because to my knowledge, unless it's changed, the EP133 you can't sequence like I want to put these here. You have to do live recording.
Yeah, maybe that'll get added.
It maybe will get added, but I mean, if you're looking for something like a drum machine, that's not going to serve you that well if you have to live input everything and quantize it, rather than a sequencer where you can just like, I want step 1, step 5, step 10.
There is that, and I think that there is a good point to that. And if that's your workflow, sure, go for it. That's not part of my personal workflow. I would prefer to key it in and quantize it. I mean, in that regard. But I think it seems to be, I don't know, the RGB, the color and the coordination of it seem to give it a flair, and it has lots of effects, which is nice. For me, it's just a drum machine. I would just get a sampler. That's what I would do.
So here's what I'm wondering, because like before I had samplers in my mind and stuff like that, I was like drum machine and then a synthesizer and all this. Now when I think of these things, I'm like, oh, why not just a sampler? But it's like we're colored in our knowledge of the sampler workflow and world, and it's like I don't know if everybody would want that type of thing, but yeah, for me it's like, well, you know, for a couple $100 more, but I think the SP's $550. It's like you can get, now you can do different colors per pad, so you can do that colorful setup on the SP404, and you can do all that, and even something like the MPC, which is a little more, or the EP133. But it's like, I don't know, I feel like some people may not need all that a sampler does and just want a drum machine. And then there, it's like, now we're talking in the $300 price range. What are some drum machines? There's probably some Roland drum machines, the Korg Volca, and the Volca sample you can put samples into, or whatever it's called. Is it the sample? You have it, right, Curtis? Because I'm thinking the Volca drum is like the drum machine thing.
There's also the Yamaha Sectrack, which
you have. How much is that?
About 300.
Okay, and so what can that, is that a sampler, or is that?
It's a drum machine. You can change the sounds on it. You can import your own sounds. It's playing samples essentially, but it's also got 3 synth engines and a sampler that run on top of that as well, including a full DX7 for full mode FM synthesis, 2 sort of analog type synthesizers, and a little sample playback engine that you can sample into, and so on. And effects on every channel, and performance effects, and so on. I mean, it is just a funny little Groovebox and a bit of fun, but in comparison, I think it offers a lot more.
Also, I always forget about these, but for $400 each, there's the circuit tracks and the circuit, is it rhythm? Yeah.
Which are a little bit more sort of pro, a bit more, you can beat something out on them. They've got nice proper pads on them. I mean, I just think, it doesn't look that bad, but I think if you had that money and you're looking for something like that, you're going to end up going for something else.
So yeah, this is kind of what I want to bring to the table here with this, is, and kind of what I was getting at when I was saying before we knew of samplers, like I was going for drum machines and stuff, but isn't a single dedicated box where it's at anymore in this age where everything's a Groovebox for $500 or $400. Like, is something that's a dedicated drum machine, granted it has sample import and stuff, for $300, is that something justifiable in this market? And it's probably dependent on the individual, right? But I'm just curious to hear what you guys think. Like something that's pretty much a drum machine for $300 versus the I forgot what it's called, that Yamaha thing, and the circuit tracks for $100 more, and the SP for a couple $100 more, the EP133 for the same price. Like, is there a market for these things still? Like dedicated, here's a drum machine, here's a $300 synth.
But I think it's less of a retail market and more of a pro market for dedicated to a function.
But then do you think that 300 is the market there for that, or are we talking like, you know, the drum log where it's like 800 or $1,000?
Some of these little groove boxes are fun and something, but you're not going to take it on tour with you or anything like that. You know, these little plastic things are going to get smashed to pieces. I think you'll be sampling it into your big, heavy, solid, rugged thing that you take on, you know, on tour with you, whether it's like an Electron box or, you know, something of that nature, or an MPC or whatever. I don't think you'd want to take these little groove boxes everywhere. It might be fun to do like an ambient gig down you know, a relatively small club or something where you've got a load of little toys on a table and effects, and, you know, you're putting something together on the fly. But yeah, I mean, they're fun, but I think they're limited in their use to a certain extent, just because I don't think they'll travel well, but they'll sample well enough, I think.
Yeah, that's true. Curtis, final thoughts on it, then we'll move on over.
I'm coming at it from a different angle in this regard. I think that the market is very much dedicated to these small little boxes that are singular based. I might be just going off of the experience of watching Atlas Castle do his thing over the last kind of couple of years or so, but the pop-up building or reproducing a live electronic track that minimizes use of backing tracks and pre-recorded loops and stuff like that does seem to be where it's going in that regard. And to its credit, the D1 seems to offer that. If we just add this as a comparison, if you have a look at the person here, it's very small tabletop, and it's all plugging in, and you could fit it all in a backpack, which is kind of, in my experience online with the electronic music community, this is where it's going. The one thing we say in live music reproduction is that's a lot of gear, and I don't want to be carrying a lot of gear around. And people are quite happy to see a more minimal set from someone that is authentically creating something on the fly. And that, go on.
But in doing that, he's using a Digitact, and he's got a Torso T1 sequencer, which is a lovely bit of kit, but not necessarily that cheap. It's quite mid-range to upper mid-range gear he's using. Although I think he's sequencing some, what's the little cord?
It's the Roland S1 or whatever.
S1 also, yeah.
Right, okay, yeah. So he's got some small format things that have been, I think, sequenced by the Torso T1. So I don't know. I mean,
well, the other thing too, the Digitact's a sampler, right? You know, I mean, he's using it mainly for drums,
but just that on its own.
Yeah, and I know 59 Perlin was using just the Digi for a while. I've done sets with the Digi and the SP and like one synth. There's a lot there. I get what you're saying, Curtis. I agree, and I think that the lower end cost of things like that makes a lot of sense for these. Like, I want to throw it in a backpack, play shows. It's like you don't have to worry so much about, well, if it breaks, like $300 again, you know, to buy it. Yeah, maybe I need samples again or something like that. But so, yeah, it's like I hear you, and I think you're right. But then, like, Eon like plays devil's advocate with, like, well, you know, that this person's using a sampler and this and that.
You
and
know,
it's like,
I think there's definitely a trade-off that's happening. Nobody wants to take a like, you know, 8-octave polysynth with them and a whole bunch of other stuff. We are looking at converged things, you know, that do the job of a couple of boxes. But I mean, you're right in the sense that everybody does want small groove boxes, little things that don't take up a lot of room and that are flexible. I think that's absolutely.
It's interesting to see that that's kind of the way it for now is going, because I remember like analog synthesis was the big thing a couple years ago, and everybody wanted these big analog synths, and now it's like everybody wants to do live stuff with tiny boxes and that are multifunctional and things like that. So it's an interesting piece of gear. I think it'd be fun. I mean, I also think depending on budget, like 300 can either seem like a lot or it can seem like a little. And, you know, oh, I just want a drum machine that's part of my setup or something like that. So cool little piece of gear. I just wanted to bring it to the table and then talk like we did a little bit of the larger kind of where the performance angle is right now and things like that. But with that, I think we'll call it there.
Sort of thing, isn't it? But
Yeah.
I think it's got competition.
Yeah. Fierce competition, because I think it doesn't do a lot that other things in that price range do, depending on what you're looking for. All right, with that, I think everybody's said their piece on it. Let's move over to Curtis, who has been making lots of stuff in Ableton Live, lots of loops, and now is trying to, or now has a new EP out. And from those loops, he took these ideas, which I think is easy. It's the fun part to do a loop, right? To just get caught in those 4 or 8 bars, just keep stacking sounds. But then at the end of it, you go, now what? Like, how do I take this, 16, 30, or in Neon Lake's case, 150 tracks and sequence it out to actually be a song that has movement, that has dynamics, that flows like that. So Curtis is kind enough today to talk a little bit about his workflow for that. So where do you want to start, Curtis?
It's a good question. Where do I want to start? Well, I'll tell you what. I'll bring up my screen so we can have a look for here. Where are we? Window. No, here we go. It's up here. That's the one. If we bring this here, and we can flick to it when the time comes through. But I think, just to reiterate, I think the notion of moving past the 8-bar loop is easier said than done. I think the internet blows it up to be this big dreaded thing, and it's kind of like the ongoing. It's like the riff in jazz, isn't it? If you're in that kind of world, they put those in the jazz world. They have the riff. We have the dreaded 8-bar loop, and I think it's easier. And I don't think there is a right or wrong way to get it done. I just think there are many ways to get it done, and this is just some of the ways that I have found of doing it. I will say that after an EP or 2 of doing it this way, I'm trying to find different ways of doing it so it doesn't become too formulaic, and so that I myself don't get bored making my own stuff, if that makes sense. But these are my findings thus far. I think that's a good way of doing it.
Yeah. Findings the way, my friend.
Findings the way, exactly. So let me bring this up. So this is the track for Spirals, which is the 3rd track, I believe, out of Intervoidal 2, which came out last week. And as you can see, that's a lot going on, and that would be a lot to loop. That would be a lot to kind of just sequence and create on the fly. If you actually have a look at the session view, which if you're familiar with Ableton, this is kind of how you make your scratches and stuff like that. These boxes that you see here, these are what's in the original live stream. But then you come across to arrangement view, and this is how I put everything in. And as you can see, there's quite a lot more going on. And there's a couple of ways of doing this. Let me bring up my notes here so we can see. The first thing to do is to basically take your loops and then sequence them. As boring as it might be, you just press the loop, and then when the loop gets to the end, you add the other loop, which you can kind of see, for example, on this drone bus here. If you see these 4 on here, going down like this, you can see that they just kind of came in and they've just started layering upon each other. That's kind of dull in the process, but that kind of gives you a kind of a palette through which to start, where then you can keep going and build from there on out. So fundamentally, first and foremost, just like we say, just build the sequence and go from there. Which leads us nicely into the second one, which is identifying where things could be thickened out. So you will, as you're building these loops, you'll have some drums, you'll have some bass, you'll have some mid-range, you might have a lead in there, and you can see on the frequency spectrum where things are coming in and where things are going out, and where you need to kind of thicken them out a little bit. The crucial one, or the obvious one, is obviously the bass, right? We had to talk about this with Levi in the Discord just before going live, this notion of how do you make the bass cut through, or how do you sculpt bass? And there seems to be a running joke that I use 19 basses on my low end. On this one, there's only 4. So there we go. There's only 4.
I like that. Only 4.
There's only 4 on that one, and they all do something else, and they all do something different. They all come in at different ways. My point here is you can see that in the bass here, and then you can see it, for example, in this yellow. This lots of yellow is the code for the color coordination for the Ultranova, which is sitting behind me. Now, as you can see, there's lots of thin lines. There's not much going on. There's not much in the way of post-processing or sending to the sender or anything like that. This is about thickening, and this is a situation where you don't necessarily want to detract away from the original loop that you've made, but you can create something there just to let those frequencies come through a little bit more.
So now, wait a second. You're embellishing, right? These are things you're adding post the loop. You're taking those loops that you made, and then you're adding additional sounds on top of them in post.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you see that, yeah. So like this blue here, you see these small lines. They're quite loopy, for example.
Mm-hmm.
This is a loop that's coming all the way through, and then I'm embellishing those loops with more loops that go over the top.
Gotcha.
If they are an 8-bar loop, for example, I might create a 16-bar loop or a 32-bar loop or even a 64-bar loop. In some cases, depending on where I'm feeling.
Gotcha. Okay.
Loops upon loops upon loops. Essentially, it's a good way to do it.
Different lengths.
Say
of different lengths, though.
So yeah, different lengths. Like we had this discussion last week, didn't we, about the notion of like, do you always have loops which kind of fit with each other and they loop in sequence, or do you have like a 4-bar loop over a 6-bar loop over a 7.25-bar loop, for example? And that is another way of doing it. You can create some interesting effects that way.
Now, what you're adding in the yellow, are you just copying the MIDI, or are you actually doing new things, performing new parts?
Forming new parts. These are all audio in this regard. We'll get to MIDI later.
Gotcha.
We'll get to MIDI later. But this is just taking the initial phases and creating some initial overdubs and some, like I say, just embellishing the frequencies out. They're not new parts, so to speak, not all the time anyway. They are just identifying where the frequency lies and just embellishing that slightly.
Okay, one more question. Are you sending the MIDI through into the Nova and then just recording the audio, or are you actually playing those parts again by hand?
I'm playing the parts again. I'm patching and I'm creating patches and I'm moving through. Yeah. MIDI is a fun one though, and I'll get to MIDI in a sec, because that can be a lot of fun in that regard. Where are we? Yes. Now, once you get to this point, as you can see on this side, we've got just a slow build up of loops, right? And then you can see all these markers coming through here. And what I've found in my exploration of these things is that you in this embellishment phase and in this kind of sequencing phase, it creates that flow, right? Not necessarily a structure, so to speak, but it does create a flow where things kind of go on forward. And this is where a little bit of maths can kind of come in, and where a little bit of what's the phrase? An ADHDification of music, as I like to call it. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is that you've got a period here of the music where the drums enter, and then you've got this drop here, right? So you've got this sequence, and you can, in what I tend to do is I tend to divvy these up, or I tend to divide these up as best I can in order to create enough change coming through at either point, right? So I think that is, for example, if you take a halfway mark, I do what's called a rise to a crest, right? So I take the full thing, I take from nothing to everything, cut it in half, and then I have what's called a crest, or in this case, I have what's called a step up, which is like the halfway mark. Then divide that back extra into smaller little builds and ups and etc. And that is usually done with drums and effects. As Eon Lake would probably like to see, there's a lot of drums involved in that regard.
Good man, this is it. Yes.
A
nice tidy grouping of sounds as well you've got in this arrangement as well. Let's give you some props for that.
It does help. I tend to split my drums into lows, mids, and highs, and then blend that in their own right. I don't know if that's something that you do at all, Ian. Like,
I tend to write a groove that I want, and then I punch holes in it with other layers, create accents and so on with other layers, so that they perform different functions depending on which sound you're talking about. But sometimes, yeah. Do you use any probability in Ableton to sort of create subtle variants in a part so that it's not, if you've got like an 8-bar loop and you've listened to it to death and you're getting a little bit of loopitis setting in, sometimes
loopitis.
Change the probability of the parts a little bit, and just so that it's not as static as it was, and get your head out of it that way. I've toyed with it a bit. I don't like the way that sometimes it seems to almost water down your idea if you do it too much. Though, if you do too much probability, it almost feels like it's hinting at something you can't rely on. But a little bit. I prefer to just record longer sequences and put just subtle bits of variation in it. And it looks like your parts are not that short either, except if there's some sort of percussion.
Yeah, well, completely the latter is what I tend to do. Like this here is one recording of how many? 110 bars at least. And I just tend to sit, and I'll tend to, because it's a meditation, right? So I have no qualms at all going back and punching in and then just recording something for 110 bars to get that variance in, especially when it comes to the Ultranova, because the way you can program the LFOs and how the LFOs map to each other, you can create that subtle variance, which if you did it with a loop, it would sound disconnected, and it would sound like the filter would be closed, for example, and then suddenly be open at 30% with a jump, and that's not what you're trying to get. You want that organic kind of texturing, so to speak. So I have no qualms about that at all in that regard. Come back to your question, the probability side of things, I've also toyed with quite a bit. I like Dr. Chaos in here, which is quite nice. The probability pack from Ableton Live is pretty good. I haven't found a track yet, apart from actually one in Brian, where I've actually used it and used it effectively. I think maybe I'm not good enough at it. I don't know. Just the randomness of it makes it a bit more difficult to kind of get my head around. If I'm in that phase, it's then I've got to find something to hook to it. And at the moment, it's too chaotic for my ability right now.
Yeah, I agree. I find the human approach just works better. Record long bits. Don't loop 4 bars.
Exactly. There's enough chaos going on up here. Thank you very much. So yeah, totally and utterly in that regard. Any more questions, or should I go on to the last bit?
No, this is really interesting. I think the idea, just really quick, I say no, and then I'm just going to make a comment. I like the idea that you're layering live long takes on top of it, because that's not something I do often, and I like the idea of it to kind of capture that human vibe on top of the loops. And I think that's something that when we're talking getting out of the loop trap or whatever you want to call it, I think that's a really smart idea to do it. Like you build the track, but you can add this very human element by just playing on top of it. And you can always delete, like chop it up and mute a part. Like, oh, actually, I didn't want that part playing there. Or take a small segment of it and chop that and loop that up or something. Like there's a lot of stuff there. But I think capturing that very human element on top is an interesting idea of kind of changing the perception that it's just loops. I remember when we did Binary Stars, there was that one track. Oh man, I wish I remembered the track, but I forget who it was by. But there was that one song that we were like, these are definitely loops, but the way it's built, you don't really think about it as this sort of like loop. And I really want to remember the tracks. It was really cool. You brought it to the episode.
You mean as well?
I forget what it was called, but yeah.
Abacus, was it?
Oh, was it? Yeah, was it Abacus or something? Yeah. Was it? Yeah, Jan, like you were saying that. Yeah, I think that was it. But yeah, I remember being like, this. You can tell these are loops, because we're like, but the way it's done,
well structured, and it just felt natural to.
Exactly, and I'm just commenting that I think that adding those human performances on top that run maybe half of the song or the whole song or something even if you don't use all of it, it's like it gives it that break from the like, oh, this is just the same part repeating or something. So yeah, anyways, Curtis, we've got what, like 10 minutes left. What else do you want to talk about? MIDI?
Yeah, I wanted to bring MIDI into it as well, because that's quite fun. This kind of comes to me in like in the second overdub phase. I usually have a second overdub where I do a solo. Everything has a solo because everything is a flow and a solo. And so what I found quite nicely with this, especially in Ableton, I'm sure you could do it in other DAWs, is recording some audio, which I've done here, which goes over the top of the loop, for example. I've then converted that into MIDI, as you can see here, and I've just turned it into this is the melodic line for that guitar solo I've just done, and I've just turned it into a Rhodes keyboard. And so there is essentially, as I'm playing the solo, there's a keyboardist behind me playing the same thing, which adds a nice little texture on top. So this is where, again, we come back into layering and things like that, and making things move a little bit by doubling up or tripling up or just adding different instruments playing the same thing. It's a really good way to break it up, because there's those little variances which turn it from a standard 4-bar loop, for example, into 4 and a bit or 8 and a bit or whatever you want to call it. And it just allows for that, again, that human aspect and that human element to come through, which means that it is less robotic and it is less sequenced, and it is almost as if someone has been playing it live, for example.
And I guess it gives it variances of intonation on certain notes as well, where you get more of one or more of the other. It can create a little bit of movement there too.
Yeah, I mean,
there's detail if you want, if you care to listen for it as well.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, if you look at the velocity marks on this, for example, it's all over the place, which is really nice. And then you can even, if you wanted to, you could go one step further and add a velocity plugin through the MIDI effects, and then play with that a little bit more, and you can have that coming through which way and everywhere, which is a really nice way of doing it in that regard.
So is that an Ableton right click slice to MIDI?
Yeah, so that's all that is. So before I layered up the solo, I just clicked on that and just did slice to MIDI. It brings up the analog plugin. It tries to replicate what you're saying, right? You just delete that and put whatever you want. It's good fun.
How do you find its note transposition?
Pretty good. It's obviously, if I obviously play with a lot of reverb and all my pedals and stuff like that, so it can get a bit funny. So you have to go in and kind of edit things out and move things around sometimes. But on the whole, pretty damn good. I'm not gonna lie.
Another, I don't think it's not always going to work for solos, but another really cool way doing it in a similar fashion is actually then trying to play the part again, but on like the keyboard instead of the guitar. You know, because you get the I mean, you could obviously, this is easier, and you could do the same thing, but you get those imperfections between it, like either a slightly different note or you played it at a different time, and you could obviously do that in the piano roll too. But I that's another cool way of doing it. But I think that's a very key thing that I didn't know you do that I think makes a huge difference, is that multi-instrument like layering, because that's the best thing. I know with 90 tracks, Eon Lake is doing it too, but stacking sounds on top of each other.
Yeah.
No, but stacking sounds that have these different intonations, different timbres, and all that type of stuff. It just thickens the sound in such a unique way. Like I love to have when I do piano, right? I'm gonna do a Rhodes on one side and a normal piano, or even a xylophone on the right side, and it just gives it this very different sound, but thicker. It's louder, even though it's not. You can tone the volume down, but it's like a thicker, bigger sound. So yeah, very cool.
It's I think there is something to be said for taking, say you've got a piano in the chords in your 8-bar loop, for example, going, okay, I've got a piano playing, what else can place keys, and then adding all of it and seeing what sticks in that regard. I think that's the beauty of a DAW, right? It's beautiful not being doorless is that you can put in anything that you want, and you can make anything work. And it does breed for fresh inspiration, which can then take you forward, and then where you go to take structure and you take in flow into account and things like that.
I find I'm often octave shifting stuff to make it fit together better as well.
Yeah,
when
especially
it's still
bass.
MIDI, you can still do that, even
Bass
if
is great.
for all the purists, you can play it in, you don't have to quantize, you can just use it like a MIDI tape deck, and it lets you at least ponder it a little bit until you've slotted it into the audio spectrum better. You can still change the sound a bit, you can still choose to double it up and send it to another instrument, you can still change the octaves they're both playing at until you like it, and then record it as audio when your computer's screaming at you. But I have one more question on that note before. Are you really using all those sends? God damn.
It's a good question. Where are we looking?
You got sends on the mixer going out to Jay, haven't you?
This was at a point where I was experimenting with submixes.
Right.
And in these days I just have reverb, 2 sets of reverb, a drum bus, and a delay, and I think a high and a mid, but I don't have anything else. I was experimenting, but a lot of them went unused in that regard. So in short, no, essentially. It was at a time when I bought one of the launch controls. I was like, sends, I'll start trying sends, and I use a bit of sends these days, but I don't. Yeah, not go to 12. I was just like, yeah, let's do it all.
Yeah, I'm a terrible insert effects person. I have some quite extravagant arrangements where everything is done on a per channel basis, and I have to start flattening audio because it's getting ridiculous. The drain that's occurring.
Yeah.
I've never tried going that way though, with an absolute ton of sends and returns.
I think it's gone somewhere.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I float between using a lot of bus sends and then almost none and just per track. And then now, I mean, when I stick with the DAWless, I get like 2 bus effects and that's it. So I have to be creative. But I think when I rebuild the DAWless desk, I'm not gonna put the Prophet up here. I'm gonna put my pedals and create a send in that mixing mixer that I have. So it'll be nice to have. So technically the SP won't get touched by it, nor the Digi, but all of the hardware will have that bus effect before getting into the Digi and the SP. So it'll be something. But I'll have the Big Sky and a couple other pieces of hardware to kind of cover.
Then you're going to go through them all and either use them or not.
So the way that this Mackie Mix 8 works is it's got an aux channel.
Yeah.
So I can have I can basically treat it like in Logic, like just a bus send, where I can send things at a percentage to it, and then it'll just all of that will come in as a stereo 2-track into the Digitact. So I can't choose like I just want the bus effect unless I mute the volume of the other ones. But it'll just be a way to kind of have some effects on the way in, because the way that the setup works is the SP is at the end. So if I want to add effects, it's going to hit anything Digitact and all. So this way I can kind of have effects going in and just more for sampling.
Yeah, I've done the same thing. I've only got one send. So
but that's what to get back to the point of what I'm saying. Yeah, it's like
and then back into the mixer.
You get used to the small amounts, and it's like then when you're back in the DAW, it's like, whoa, I could just have bus on bus on bus on bus, like what we were seeing all the way to J or whatever for Curtis. Like I think that's a really cool way to do it. But then, like you're saying, kind of Curtis, like the beauty of the DAW is you can just keep going, right? But then that's also the curse of the DAW, the option paralysis of like, well, I could just double this and now I can double that, and then you end up with an Eon like 150 tracks, and you're like, oh, well, this is going to be a fun mixing process.
I think there's something in that. I think while, for example, in the last kind of like 18 months or so, you've gone down the DAW-less route, I've gone further into the DAW. We being the yin and yang humans that we are. And I feel like I've come out the other side of that. And like, it's the the 100-track stuff, as I go, or as I've developed my workflow with Ableton, the groups are made pretty quick, and so the mids all get a bus, or the chords will get a bus, or the guitars will get a bus. And so yes, you do have 100 channels or so, but they are already bussed, and you are mixing these macros which come through, which makes everything just a little bit more simple in that regard. Maybe that's just my experience.
I don't like
know.
mixing the macros. That's where my issue. I love the nitty gritty. Each channel is going to get notched EQ. If it was just the macro, I'd be like too bothered by this one needs a little more granular. Like I just go, when it comes to the DAW, I go in deep on the per track, because that's just the way I developed making tracks. I didn't use bus sends until maybe 2-3 years ago. Like everything was per track effects. And so it becomes like crazy. But I could see if you're doing it in that way, where you have templates first of all while you're writing, and then you have these macro, like all of the melodies are in this bus channel, and then all of the drums are in this, it would be easier. But yeah, it just I think it depends on like how granular you want to go in the mix, and like where you feel you need to get to and all that. But I say that as with DAWless, like usually I bake in the recording and that's it. Like, oh, the hi-hat's too loud. Oh, that's tough. The one thing that I do like though with Logic is the stem split. Any 2-track, any DAWless 2-track, you just put it in there, stem split it. And then if you know the BPM, you can even embellish on it. Stem splitting really changes the game. I'm curious if Ableton adds stem splitting, but I know you use FL too, if it'll make its way into your workflow at all. Because I find it's this piece of the puzzle that really kind of like fixes some of my gripes with DAWless. So
I get you. Right now I'm using I use FL for the stem separation, and I import it into Ableton. I mean, Ableton would be foolish separation at some point. And I got muted, so I don't know if
no, I hit the wrong button. You were clipping a bit, so I was taking down your mic, and then it hit the mute button.
Okay.
But what were you saying? You stem splitting in FL, and then you were saying if Ableton probably adds it, right?
Well, Ableton would be silly if they didn't add it. Everyone's doing it right now. It's the trendy thing, and it's such a simple thing that it just becomes a staple.
Yeah. All right. Anything? My voice is about gone from being sick still. So, is there anything else you want to go over before we head out?
I mean, I could quiz this guy.
Don't speak, Ian. Like, don't even start.
Hours yet, but fortunately, he's one of the ones I can go fishing in his head anytime.
But Curtis, is there anything we missed that you want to cover?
One very quick thing, just effects. I think that effects and transitions, rises, down sweeps, crashes, etc., which are outside. I don't know about you guys. I personally treat them differently. They're not in the drum bus. They are part of their own buses, or part of their own segment. But yeah, these things really elevate and make the track a track, and stop it being so loopy in that regard. Like you've got a bass coming in, and then you've got a lead coming in, and then you've got a keys coming or something. You're breaking it up with ear candy. These effects is a really good way of doing that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the biggest piece of changing from a loop to a track is, like, for me personally, and I don't want to take away from your thing, but I sequence out the idea, right? And then usually I'm like, it's just not right. But then I do dropouts where, like, at the last bar of this, I'll cut the drums to make a transition, or I'll add a riser or reverse crash, or just like a Valhalla. Something I know Ian Lake does is he'll take, like, resample a part and just mess with it and take that. But what I'll do is, like, I'll take Valhalla Supermassive and just add automation so that the wet goes all the way up to cause this, like, riser basically, but from a piece you have in there. And then you just drop it, and that's the, and boom, you're in the new part. And I think that really changes the concept of these are loops to, this is a track now, because it's just this subconscious thing in our ear that we hear these parts, a rise, a crash, a revert, and that to us is like, something's changed.
Well, it's also allowing the loop to sound different isn't it? In a number of different ways, just allowing it to change or evolve, or dare I say it, stop.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's what I have to do, is just stop it and then go, right. Then
Anybody do EQ transitions, like take the high end or the low end out of the kick? You know, like that EDM one with I love doing that, or anything like that.
Usually only on remixes. But yeah, I've filtered drums a fair bit and stuff like that. Low passes, things. It's an easy thing to do when you're subgrouping stuff, and you can start putting glitch effects on certain instrument groups and whatnot. That's fun.
Not in that regard as well, just taking micro cuts out of the loop. That just springs to mind right now. Get the drum loop every so often, cut a hi-hat out, cut a snare out. Is that snare going to come in directly on the second, or is it going to be your 2 and a bit? That kind of thing. That's good fun.
Or alternatively, adding
on top.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, take that. I do like a hi-hat roll, right? Add the velocity, and then, or like a big fill in the drums. Here comes the toms and the snare, or just like, one thing I love to do too is to subtly add motion, is slowly add more ghost notes in the snares. Like every couple bars, the snares now have more ghost notes, or the hi-hats will have some very, very quiet little like rolls, and then it's kind of like subtly changing the loop over time. And then when the next part comes, there's a dropout or something, and then the drums are different again. But little like ghost notes and stuff just add so much. And that's like, I wish I was a drummer, because that's what I would just be doing, these parts like live, doing the drums and just adding all these little different ghost notes. But I'm too lazy to do it like line by line. But I'll just add like, okay, for the next 4 bars, there's going to be this ghost note, and then
I've even been known to do that with beat repeaters and like mapping the probability to a mod wheel and just fading in beat repeat in certain places and changing the amount of it depending on how messed up I want it to sound. But that was not, to get a drummy sort of feel. It was to get an artificial sort of glitchy sort of feel.
Yeah. Well, I think we could talk for days about transitions and stuff. Maybe that's something for a future episode where we can go into some ways to do it. But Curtis, thank you for sharing that. That actually, not like I'm surprised, but that was actually super helpful for me, like to see that the workflow. Because like I said, I don't think I've ever done like a live, just like full performance on top of a track, maybe guitar, but that's something I definitely want to try now, to just like, even on a DAWless track, just like add this full performance on top. I've done where I've just set a drone, like a VCA drone, and let it play, but that's not me actually playing. I just held a note and then hit the VCA. But let us know in the chat if you're watching this back in the comments, or I guess comments are now on Spotify too. What was your takeaway from this? Like, did you learn something? Doesn't have to be for Ableton. This applies to Logic users like me, or even DAWless stuff. But what's your takeaway from this? Like, from it, how do you take a loop and go from there? Like, what did you learn from Curtis? But Curtis, thanks again for sharing that. And we'll be back next week, 11 a.m. Pacific. We'll be talking with Sketch Audio. If you've got questions, post them in the Discord. Massive thanks to everybody who did the secret sample. We had a lot of fun with that. Curtis is muting from the cat. We don't mind the cat, Curtis, but yeah, it was really cool. If you want to get in on the samples and the server challenges that we do, the Discord is open to all. The link should be in the description. But yeah, come hang out. And massive thanks again to all of our patrons who support what we do. Eon Lake has something else he wants to add. Go ahead, my friend.
And we'll be including the Bandcamp link for Fragment 2, I assume. Yes. Go check it out.
I think that's probably in the description, but if it's not, it'll be in there after and in the show notes. But yeah, you'll want to check it out. Unfortunately, Curtis can't share audio still, so we weren't able to play the parts. But if you want to hear the cool song that he was making with all those loops and things like that, bandcamp.com. I think, what is it? Curtis.bandcamp.com?
Curtis.bandcamp.com/intervoidal2.
Well, I mean, if you just go to the bandcamp.com, it'll be there. But yeah, and you can also go to Audionautic Records.bandcamp.com. It's through our record label. We've got some really cool music coming out very soon. And we have had some amazing music like Eon Lake come out recently.
Sunwarper.
Well, I didn't want to say it. But yes. I was hoping you'd say it, but it's okay. But yeah, we've got a lot of music coming. I want to see something too. We're looking at some like compilation ideas and stuff, but I gotta tell you, those secret sample tracks were really, really good. So I don't know. We got to see if there's something there we can do.
Mm.
But I'll talk to
Yeah.
everybody, see if everybody's cool with us at least putting it up on the Discord for everyone to hear, or they can all post it in the server challenge. But yeah, to get in on the next server challenge, I'll be posting a poll. It's the server challenge channel on Discord. Just head there and join in on the poll. We've got a couple different votes going on that I'll be posting. So yeah, these are a lot of fun. Anyways, Curtis, anything before we hop off?
No, just a couple of links there in the chat. One for my EP and one for the Discord. Go and join it.
Good boy.
When it pops up, I don't see it. Am I tripping? It's not in the chat yet on StreamYard.
Mate, it's always a little bit slow.
Are you logged in as Audionautic?
I am, yeah.
Okay, yeah, because sometimes it does it weird. Bendu says I vote for secret sample comp. Yeah, we have to figure that one out because there's some serious issues with Bandcamp now where if you have more than 15 artists, it's $600 a year to run a label, and we cannot afford that. So we have to figure that one out because we have about, I think, 11 artists, and we've got a couple more still coming. So as of now, I think it's what, 20 a month, so it's like $240 a year, but I don't think we can scale that quickly. But I would like to do something with that, so we'll have to figure that one out. I don't know. Maybe, I'm not sure. Maybe we just, I don't know, because if we don't tag the artist, you'd have to put their names like on the. It would be weird. So I'm not sure. We have to figure that one out, Bendu. But I would like to do something with it. So we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see about that. Yeah, I'm not seeing those links, Curtis. Just try one more time because I want to put those up.
Maybe if I do,
just make sure you're logged in as Audionautic, not Curtis, because the links won't show up if it's Curtis.
Yeah, so we have this one here. Have that one there. Does that pop up?
No, it's still not popping. Oh, there it is. There it is. There it is. Yeah, there it is. I've got it.
That's that one. And then the Discord one. Give me a sec. Discord one.
No worries. But yeah, it's a really big bummer about Bandcamp because it's like $600 to have more than 15 artists is kind of crazy a year.
I've just submitted a piece for a compilation to someone. I can't remember their name off now, but they've got like a 24-hour compilation going on right now for ambient drone, and 24 hours of ambient drone, that feels to me like a lot of artists, and they must be doing something. So I'll reach out to them and see what they're doing.
Find out, because either they're not linking the artists or they've got the label, the higher tier label, and they're doing that. I mean, me personally, I like to do everything right. I'd like the artists to be linked and like all that. Maybe we don't have to do that and it will still log as like them, but I think if you want it to show as like as Bendu, as Sunwarper, it has to be done in that way. So we'll look into it, but we want to do something, let's say, for the secret sample and then something later in the year. So we'll figure it out. But in the interim, if you do want to help us get to that $600 a year or something, the Patreon or there's a PayPal you can donate as well if you want to do like a one-time donation. But I mean, just hanging out is of course more than enough. But if you want to help us keep the lights on, that's how to do it. With that, Eon, like anything before we go?
Nope. Love to everybody who listened.
Yeah.
Thank
Curtis?
you very much. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. Thank you for everyone who has bought a copy of Intervoidal or listened to it and enjoyed it. It's really appreciate it. And yeah, if you like what we do, spread the word. Keep us going.
Yeah, we'll be back next week, but we're always in the Discord. Everyone is welcome to join. The link is in the chat, but it's also going to be or is in the description. So we'd love to see you over there. It's a great place, and these challenges are the best. I mean, I learned a lot just doing my challenge, and I'm like, I want to finish that track. I'm finishing it. I made it very short. I didn't realize we weren't going to play it all anyways, but like it's one bar and then things change every bar, like, or every 4 bars or whatever. I usually like to do like 8 or 16. So I want to explore the space a little bit more. It's only 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I want to hit like 3 or 4 minutes. And I was hearing in the middle part, like I could do a lot of percussion, like build this big percussion thing out. Maybe that's something Eon Lake could help with as a drummer, and since it's his original sample. So I'll hit up Eon Lake. We'll see. But I definitely want to do something with that. Sketch Audio says, cheers, looking forward to next week. Yeah, really looking forward to talking with you. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be great. Little Bro says, bye, everyone. Cheers, Audionautic. I really loved your track, Little Bro. That was awesome. So, yeah. Great job. Great job, everybody in that secret sample. We had a lot of fun. Anyways, we'll be back next week, so we'll see you then.